The Galactic Safety Commission had spent 12 millennia refining its system of planetary classification, a monumental achievement in bureaucratic order that had brought a semblance of predictability to a chaotic universe. Across 4 sprawling spiral arms, 89 worlds bore the dreaded Crimson Marker, a designation that transcended simple danger. These were cosmic nightmares, aberrations where the fundamental laws of physics didn't just bend but snapped, places where reality itself wore thin. They were the kinds of worlds that made black holes look like peaceful, well-ordered retirement communities. For 12,000 years, this system had worked. Civilization saw the Crimson Marker and gave those worlds a wide berth, respecting the finality of that classification. Then the humans showed up. Inspector Kalen Jorek had been a safety inspector for the Commission for 263 years. In that time, he had seen industrial accidents, stellar flare incidents, and more than his fair share of bureaucratic incompetence, but he had never encountered anything that genuinely surprised him. The universe, he believed, operated on predictable principles. Civilizations, for the most part, behaved according to rational self-interest. Species, as a general rule, avoided death. Simple stuff, really. It was the bedrock of galactic society. His morning started with the familiar comfort of routine. A terrible, nutrient-rich coffee substitute that tasted like recycled despair. A tall stack of routine violation reports from perfectly mundane mining operations. 3 separate memos about the proper usage of commas and hazard documentation, a debate so entrenched it predated his own career. The usual bureaucratic slog that kept the galaxy's countless civilizations from accidentally exterminating themselves through simple negligence. Then his supervisor, a being named Grax, who communicated primarily through a complex language of exasperated sighs and palpable waves of disappointment, deposited a data tablet on his desk with enough force to crack the reinforced surface. Grax was a Vorn, a species of silicon-based lifeforms that resembled mobile geological formations, and his current expression suggested a tectonic shift of profound irritation. "Tell me this is a clerical error," Grax rumbled, his voice like grinding bedrock. Kalen Jorek, a Viridian with smooth, green-hued skin and 3 eyelids that blinked in independent succession, picked up the tablet. The screen glowed with a list of resource extraction permits. 92 of them, all filed properly, all approved by the automated system. All for worlds bearing the Crimson Marker. "This has to be a database corruption," Kalen muttered, his 3 stomachs churning with a familiar sense of bureaucratic dread. He scrolled through the documents, his long, slender fingers dancing across the screen. Nobody would actually. He paused, his fingers hovering over the species designation field. He had to check. It was protocol. He tapped the field. The word that appeared sent a shockwave through his system. His 3 stomachs suddenly felt like they were trying to digest each other in a frantic, biological panic. "Humans," he whispered, the word itself feeling alien on his tongue. "From Sol 3. The bipedal mammals. The very same." He looked up at Grax, his triple-lidded eyes wide with disbelief. "But they only achieved faster-than-light travel 8 standard years ago. They're barely out of their own solar system. They're ships. I read the preliminary report. Their vessels are held together with optimism and what they call welded metal. They don't even have proper radiation shielding yet." Grax's entire rocky form seemed to slump, a gesture of utter exhaustion that communicated across multiple dimensions. Apparently, that hasn't stopped them from establishing mining operations on 34 Crimson-marked worlds. With more pending. Kalen felt his career, his entire orderly existence, flashing before his eyes. "Crimson Marker," he said, his voice a strained hiss. "Crimson. Do you understand? What that means? Those planets kill our probes. Our automated probes. Things without nerve endings or survival instincts. Things that don't care about being liquefied or crushed or dissolved into their constituent atoms." "I am aware," Grax said dryly. "We are talking about worlds with gravitational fields that turn organic bone into a fine powder. Atmospheric pressure that compresses carbon into diamonds. Radiation levels that make the coronas of blue supergiants look like a therapeutic spa. These aren't mining sites. These are apocalypses with geological features. Yes, Kalen agreed, his mind reeling. And humans adjust. What? Digging holes in them. Grax placed another, heavier tablet on the desk. This one contained financial reports that seemed to defy logic itself. They're not just digging holes. They're profitable. Extremely profitable. They're extracting resources that every economic model in the known galaxy said were theoretically valuable but practically impossible to obtain. Kalen stared at the numbers. His highly logical Viridian brain tried to reject them as a work of elaborate fiction. This can't be real. These profit margins violate the fundamental principles of risk versus reward economics. Nobody makes this much money unless they discovered how to transmute base elements or found a way to monetize the heat death of the universe. The Cygnus or Syndicate is having a collective nervous breakdown, Grax continued. Apparently, humans are undercutting their prices on compressed core metals by 60%. 60%. Kalen squawked. That's impossible. The Syndicate has been mining for 8,000 years. They have technology that makes atoms politely separate themselves on command. How are humans, who've been in space for less time than it takes me to file a proper safety report, competing with that? Grax's silence was the answer. No, Kalen said, a wave of pure, unadulterated horror washing over him. No, no, no. Don't tell me we have to investigate this. Please don't tell me we have to actually go to these places. You're our most experienced field inspector. I'm experienced at inspecting things that don't immediately kill everyone in the vicinity, Kalen pleaded. I inspect facilities on nice, boring planets with reasonable gravity and non-lethal atmospheres. Planets where the rain is actual water and not sulfuric acid. I have a spotless safety record because I don't go to places that actively and enthusiastically murder visitors. Your shuttle leaves in 3 hours. 3 hours. I need at least 6 months to mentally prepare for this. I need therapy. I need hazard insurance. I need to update my will, possibly create a new, more pessimistic version of it. We received a formal complaint from 15 different mining corporations, Grax stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. They're claiming humans are using illegal technology or receiving outside assistance from an unknown advanced power. We are legally obligated to investigate. Kalen Jorek slumped in his chair, the weight of 2.5 centuries of predictable, safe work crushing down on him. His life had been so peaceful yesterday, so calm, so free of humans and their apparent, inexplicable death wish. Which facility am I inspecting first? He asked weakly. Grax consulted his own tablet. Mining Station Triumph located on Xylos B. Kalen pulled up the file on his own tablet. What's the hazard classification? Gravity 12.6 times standard. Atmospheric composition 93% chlorine gas. Surface temperature ranges from 400 to 600 degrees Celsius. Tectonic instability causes magnitude 8 earthquakes every 11 minutes. Kalen closed all 3 of his eyes. Any redeeming qualities? Beautiful sunsets, Grax said flatly. Apparently, the chlorine reacts with the solar radiation to create stunning orange and purple light displays. Oh, wonderful, Kalen sighed. I'll make sure to admire the view while my skeleton collapses into a fine powder and my lungs dissolve into a slurry. The humans have been operating there for 14 months, Grax added, almost as an afterthought. 0 fatalities. Kalen's eyes snapped open. What? 0 fatalities on a planet that should kill unprotected organic life in approximately 30 seconds. 22 seconds according to our models. Yes, Grax confirmed. This was impossible. This violated everything Kalen Jorek understood about biology, physics, and common sense. Species didn't survive crimson-marked environments. They died in crimson-marked environments. That was the entire point of the crimson marker classification. What kind of protective equipment are they using? He demanded. Stasis fields, localized reality manipulation, some kind of exotic matter shielding we haven't cataloged yet, Grax speculated, scrolling through his tablet. Then he stopped. Wait. According to the facility manifest. Pressure. Suits. Pressure suits. Yes, pressure suits. The kind of thing you'd wear to visit a planet with slightly uncomfortable atmospheric conditions. Not the kind of thing you'd need to survive hell. The manifest lists them as heavy-duty pressure suits, Grax read aloud. If that helps. It doesn't, Kalen said, his voice trembling. It really doesn't, Grax turned to leave. Your transport is a Type 7 long-range shuttle. The Commission is providing you with a full hazard analysis kit and emergency evacuation insurance. Try not to die. The paperwork would be tremendous. And that was how Kalen Jorek found himself, 3 hours and 42 minutes later, sitting in a shuttle that smelled faintly of recycled air and existential dread, accelerating toward a planet that wanted him dead. The journey took 6 days. 6 days of reviewing safety protocols that now seemed laughably inadequate. 6 days of reading geological surveys that described Xylos B in terms usually reserved for describing the interior of stars. 6 days of wondering if he should have chosen a different career path. Maybe something safe, like deep-sea diving into black holes or juggling antimatter. His communication system chimed on day 4. Xylos B mining station triumph to approaching vessel. Please state your purpose and designation. The voice was human, female, and disturbingly cheerful considering she was living on a planet that should be classified as a war crime against geology. This is Inspector Kalen Jorek of the Galactic Safety Commission, he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm here to conduct a routine facility inspection. There was a pause, then laughter. Actual, genuine laughter. Oh, man. They actually sent an inspector, the voice said, seemingly to someone else. Hey, Eva. Eva, we VE got a safety inspector coming. Another voice, farther away, laughed. Yeah, I know, right. Okay, Inspector, the first voice said, returning to the comms. You're cleared to dock at Bay 3. Fair warning, we're about to have our scheduled quake in about 8 minutes, so if you could hustle, that would be great. We lose about 20% of our docking clamps every time, and I'd rather not lose your ship. You lose docking clamps regularly? Kalen asked, his 3 hearts seizing in his chest. Only the ones that aren't properly reinforced. It's fine, mostly. The communication cut off. Kalen stared at his console. His hands were shaking. 20% failure rate. 20%. And she said it like she was discussing the weather. He considered turning around, just pivoting the shuttle 180 degrees and accelerating back towards civilized space where people understood that a 20% catastrophic failure rate was, by any sane measure, bad. But he was a professional. He defiled the inspection paperwork. There were procedures. So he guided his shuttle toward the landing bay of what was quite possibly the most insane construction project in galactic history. Mining Station Triumph looked like someone had decided to build an industrial complex inside an active volcano and then said, you know what? This needs more fire. The facility clung to the side of a massive cliff face, all brutal angles and reinforced plating scarred by eons of brutal atmospheric conditions. Enormous exhaust vents belched superheated gas into the chlorine atmosphere. Landing platforms jetted out like metal tongues, swaying slightly in the immense pressure differentials. The docking procedure took 12 minutes. 12 minutes of fighting atmospheric turbulence that threw his shuttle around like a child's toy. 12 minutes of watching structural supports flex and bend under gravitational stress. 12 minutes of absolute certainty that he was about to die. Then his shuttle locked into place with a clang that reverberated through his very bones. He sat there for a moment, breathing heavily, trying to remember why he ever thought this job was a good idea. His console showed the external atmosphere. Chlorine gas at concentrations that would corrode most known metals within a cycle. Temperature reading, 470 degrees Celsius. Gravity crushing down with enough force to make standing upright an Olympic event. And somewhere in this nightmare, humans were working. The airlock cycled, pressure equalized, and the inner door opened. A human stood there in what Kalen Jorek could only describe as a really thick suit. Not the sophisticated environmental systems he'd expected, not the cutting-edge technology that would explain how anyone survived here. Just layers of reinforced material, a helmet with a surprisingly simple filtration system, and boots that looked like they'd been designed to anchor a small spacecraft. Inspector Kalen Jorek, the human S voice came through a speaker in the helmet. Still female, still disturbingly cheerful. I'm Eva Rostova, facility coordinator. Welcome to Triumph. Sorry about the rough landing. Atmospheric conditions are pretty mild today. Mild, Kalen managed, his voice cracking. I was nearly thrown into the cliff face. Yeah, but you weren't, so that's a win, Eva said, her tone utterly reasonable. Come on, let me show you around. We've got about 4 minutes before the quake hits, and I'd rather be in the reinforced sections when that happens. She turned and walked away. Kalen, operating on pure bureaucratic instinct, followed. The interior of the facility was somehow worse than he'd imagined. Corridors lined with exposed pipes that hissed and groaned under the strain. Pressure doors every 20 meters, each one scarred and dented. Warning signs in multiple languages, all variations of danger, lethal hazard, and seriously, don't touch this unless you're having a really bad day. And everywhere, humans were working. They moved with a casual efficiency through an environment that should have killed them instantly, checking pressure gauges, adjusting equipment, having conversations about load-bearing capacities and extraction rates like they were discussing sports scores. How many personnel are stationed here? Kalen asked, his investigator training kicking in despite his terror. Currently 163, Eva replied, leading him down a corridor that vibrated with a deep, rhythmic hum. We're actually understaffed. Corporate keeps promising to send more people, but apparently there's a wait list. Everyone wants to work the Crimson sites. Wait list. People want to come here. Better pay, better benefits, better stories, Eva said as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Better stories. People want to come here for stories. Well, yeah, she said, glancing back at him. I mean, how many people can say they've worked on a planet that's technically classified as unservicable? It's a hell of a resume builder. Plus, the hazard bonuses are amazing. I'm making 6 times what I'd earn on a normal mining station. They passed a window. Kalen made the mistake of looking out. The landscape of Xylos B stretched below them, a hellscape of valleys filled with crystallized chlorine compounds and mountains that vented superheated gas in constant, massive plumes. The sky was a toxic orange that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. And in the middle of this apocalyptic vision, he could see other humans outside, working. Moving equipment, operating machinery, out on the surface where the gravity was crushing and the atmosphere was poison and the temperature would cook most organic life in minutes. Are those people? Outside the facility. He practically screamed. Eva glanced out the window. Oh yeah, that's the surface extraction team. They're pulling up compressed metals from the deep veins. Really good stuff down there. We're hitting quotas that shouldn't be physically possible, which is nice for our quarterly reviews. But they're outside. In 12.6 gravity. And chlorine gas. Yeah, the gravity takes some getting used to, Eva conceded. We lost a lot of equipment in the first month before we figured out the proper reinforcement ratios. And the chlorine isn't that bad once you've got proper filtration. We only have to replace the suit seals every 3 days or so. 3 days. The seals degrade. Well, yeah. It's a corrosive atmosphere. Everything degrades. That's why we have such stringent maintenance schedules. Safety first. Kalen felt his sense of reality beginning to crack. These humans were treating guaranteed death as a minor inconvenience. They were discussing catastrophic equipment failure like it was a routine maintenance issue. They had wait lists to come here. The facility suddenly shuddered. A deep, rolling vibration that made every surface hum. "Their SR quake," Eva said brightly. "Magnitude 7.9. Pretty standard." The shaking intensified. Dust fell from ceiling panels. Warning klaxons blared. Somewhere, something metal screamed as it bent past tolerances. And Eva Rostova just stood there, checking her tablet, completely unconcerned that the planet was actively trying to shake the facility apart. Any structural damage? Someone called from down the corridor. "Checking now," Eva shouted back. "Bay 6 lost 2 support struts, but the automated systems are already compensating. We're good." The shaking subsided after 30 seconds that felt like 30 hours. Kalen realized he'd been holding his breath. His 3 hearts were hammering against his ribs. His emergency evacuation instincts were screaming at him to run, to flee, to do anything other than be here. "Happens every 11 minutes, Eva explained, noticing his distress. "Oh, you get used to it. Come on, let me show you the main extraction area. That's where the really interesting stuff happens." She led him deeper into the facility, through pressure doors that looked like they belonged on a military bunker, past storage areas filled with containers that hummed with strange energy, down corridors that vibrated with the constant rumble of mining equipment. They emerged onto an observation platform overlooking a massive chamber. Below them, humans operated machinery that looked like it had been designed by someone who hated safety regulations with a personal vendetta. Drills the size of buildings bit into rock that glowed with internal heat. Conveyor systems moved tons of material through processing units that spat sparks and flame. Robotic arms, controlled by humans in pressure suits, manipulated objects that should have required specialized gravity manipulation technology. "This is Processing Center Alpha," Eva said with obvious pride. "We're running 24-hour operations, 3 shifts, rotating every 8 hours. Current output is approximately 12,000 tons of compressed core metals per day." Kalen tried to process what he was seeing. "Those drilling systems. They're operating in 12.6 gravity. That should require compensators. Expensive compensators. I don't see any gravity manipulation technology." "Nope, too expensive," Eva said. "We just built everything heavier and reinforced all the moving parts. Took some trial and error, but we figured it out." "Trial and error," Kalen repeated weakly. "You experimented with industrial equipment in extreme gravity." "Well, yeah. I mean, that's how you learn, right?" Eva said. "First drill we deployed pancaked itself in about 20 seconds. Second one lasted almost 3 minutes. Third one actually worked but kept overheating. By the 5th attempt, we had a functioning model. Now they run pretty smoothly." "What happened to the first 4 drills?" "Spectacular catastrophic failures," Eva said with a grin. "We got video if you want to see. Really educational stuff. Some of the engineers watch the footage for fun during break periods." Kalen Jorek was beginning to understand something terrible. These humans weren't succeeding despite the horrific conditions. They were succeeding because they treated the horrific conditions as problems to be solved through repeated catastrophic failure and a casual disregard for conventional wisdom. "I need to see your safety protocols," he said, falling back on official procedures because his brain refused to process anything else. "Absolutely. Got them right here." Eva pulled up a document on her tablet and handed it to him. He read the first page, then the second, then the third. His hand started shaking. This ISNTA safety protocol," he stammered. "This is a list of things that went wrong and how many people died each time." "Right," Eva said, beaming. "That's how we developed our safety protocols. We tried stuff, saw what killed people, then implemented procedures to make those deaths happen less often. It's very evidence-based." "Less often?" Kalen whispered, horrified. "Not at all. Well, sure, ideally, Eva said, her cheerfulness finally dimming slightly. But we're working on a Crimson Death world with limited resources and tight profit margins. We got our fatality rate down to about 6% per quarter, which corporate says is totally acceptable given the extreme conditions. Kalen Jorek felt something inside him break. 6% per quarter. They were losing people regularly, predictably, and they considered this acceptable. 6%, he whispered. You're telling me that approximately 10 of your current workers will probably die in the next 3 months. Statistically, yeah, but we got really good life insurance policies and the families receive excellent compensation packages. Corporate takes care of people. They're dead. Well, yes, but their families are financially secure. It's all about risk versus reward, right? Everyone here knows the dangers. They signed the contracts. They understood what they were getting into. Another quake hit. This one stronger. Magnitude 8.2. The observation platform swayed. Metal groaned. Below them, one of the massive drills toppled sideways, crashing into a processing unit in a shower of sparks and screaming metal. Alarms wailed. Humans rushed toward the damage, not away from it. Ah, damn, Eva said, watching the chaos below. That's going to set us back at least 4 hours and we'll probably have to replace that entire processing unit. Hope nobody was in the impact zone. Hope? Kalen practically shrieked. You hope nobody was crushed. Well, yeah, Eva said, looking at him. I mean, I can't see everyone from here, but the safety sensors would have alerted if anyone was in critical danger. Probably. The sensor grid is only about 70% functional after the last meteor shower, a passing human engineer commented helpfully. Kalen gripped the railing of the observation platform, his knuckles white. His entire worldview was collapsing. These humans had taken every principle of workplace safety and thrown it into their corrosive chlorine atmosphere. I'm shutting this facility down, he said quietly. Eva turned to look at him, her expression unreadable behind the helmet's visor. What? I'm shutting this facility down, his voice rose to a shout. This is the most catastrophic violation of safety standards I have ever seen. You're operating equipment that regularly fails. You're accepting fatality rates that are, by any sane measure, insane. You're working in conditions that should be theoretically impossible. This facility is a disaster waiting to happen. It probably is a disaster that is currently happening. Okay, first of all, Eva said, her cheerful tone finally showing some irritation, we're not violating any safety standards. We're following galactic guidelines. Every single regulation has been met. Impossible. Not impossible, Eva countered, pulling up another document on her tablet. Check your own rule book. Galactic safety standards were written for normal mining operations on normal planets. They specify minimum protective equipment standards, maximum acceptable atmospheric contamination levels, gravity compensation requirements for above 8 standard gravities, and radiation shielding protocols. We meet all of those. She pointed to the screen. Our pressure suits exceed minimum protection standards by 20%. Our atmospheric filtration systems are rated for contamination levels up to 98%, which is above the 93% chlorine we're experiencing. We don't need gravity compensators because the regulations only require them for sensitive equipment operating above 8 gravities, and we reinforced our equipment to operate without compensators. And radiation here is actually pretty minimal. So that's not even an issue. Kalen stared at the document. She was right. Technically, horrifyingly, impossibly right. The regulations had been written with the assumption that nobody would be insane enough to work in crimson-marked conditions. They'd been designed for normal mining operations where the biggest hazards were cave-ins and equipment malfunctions, not planets actively trying to kill you. Humans had found every loophole and exploited them with suicidal efficiency. But the fatality rate, he tried weakly. Not regulated, Eva said simply. There's no galactic standard for acceptable workplace fatalities because most civilizations don't have workplace fatalities. Everyone just assumes zero is the goal and builds their safety culture around that. We're aware that that's not ideal, but like I said, risk versus reward. The compensation packages are really, really good. Another human approached, this one male, built like a reinforced cargo container. His pressure suit was scarred and patched in at least 20 places. Eva, we got a problem with the deep extraction team, the man said, his voice tense. Deca's suit failed and he's been exposed to the atmosphere for about 90 seconds. He's conscious, but the chlorine inhalation is pretty bad. Medbay is prepping for emergency treatment. Is he going to make it? Eva asked. Probably. Maybe 70% chance. His lungs are pretty scrambled, though. Okay, pull the team back and run equipment diagnostics, Eva commanded. I want to know why his suit failed and get me an incident report in the next hour. The man nodded and walked away. Eva turned back to Kalen. See. We take safety seriously. Full incident analysis, equipment diagnostics, medical treatment, everything by the book. That man is probably going to die, Kalen said, his voice hollow. 70% survival rate ISNT probably going to die, Eva corrected him. That is probably going to live. You're being really negative about this. Kalen sat down on the observation platform. His legs wouldn't hold him anymore. He'd been a safety inspector for 263 years. He'd seen dangerous operations. He'd seen corner-cutting corporations. He'd seen facilities that pushed safety margins, but he'd never seen anything like this. Humans treated survival as a statistical probability rather than an assumed outcome. They calculated acceptable losses like they were budgeting for office supplies. They signed up for jobs that might kill them for slightly better pay and bragging rights. They were insane. I need to see the other facilities, he said finally. All of them. I need to understand the full scope of this operation. Sure, we can arrange transport to any of our Crimson sites, Eva said, her cheerful demeanor returning. Where do you want to go next? Kalen consulted his tablet, scrolling through the list of human mining operations. Each one more impossible than the last. Tartarus Prime, he said, picking one at random. What's there? Eva checked her own tablet. Oh, that's a pressure facility operating at 1,200 atmospheres. Really cool stuff. They're extracting crystal formations from the deep crust. The pressure is so intense that carbon compounds form these incredible geometric structures. Makes diamonds look like cheap glass. 1,200 atmospheres, Kalen repeated. That pressure would crush any known biological organism into paste. Yep. That's why the facility operates entirely below ground and all the workers stay in pressure-compensated chambers. They use remote drones for most of the actual extraction work. Remote drones. Kalen felt a sliver of hope. That sounds almost reasonable. Oh, except when the drones break down, Eva added. Then someone has to go into the pressure zones to fix them. We got specialized suits for that, but they're only rated for about 20 minutes at full depth before the seals start to fail. And if the seals fail, catastrophic compression injuries. Really messy. We lost 8 people that way in the last year. Of course they had. Fine, Kalen sighed. Arrange transport to Tartarus Prime. I'll continue my investigation there. Eva smiled. Great. I'll send ahead and let them know you're coming. Oh, and Inspector. You might want to read up on deep pressure operations before you arrive. The physics gets a little weird down there, and it helps if you understand what you're looking at. Kalen spent the next week traveling to human mining facilities. Each one was a fresh horror. Each one violated his understanding of what was possible. On Tartarus Prime, he watched humans work in pressure so intense it bent light. The facility was a maze of reinforced tunnels drilled through rock that was harder than starship hulls. Workers rotated in shifts of 20 minutes, emerging from the pressure zones with bloodshot eyes and shaking hands, talking casually about adaptation symptoms and acceptable neural stress. The facility director, a woman named Quinn Havelock, who spoke with the disturbing technical precision of a bomb disposal expert, showed him the extraction operations. Massive drones built like deep-sea submarines crawled through tunnels where the pressure would pancake conventional equipment in seconds. When they inevitably broke down, humans in suits that looked like they'd been designed to contain explosions ventured into the crushing darkness to perform repairs. "We lose about 2% of our maintenance staff per month," Quinn explained, showing him safety statistics on her tablet. "But the turnover rate is low because the pay is exceptional. And most people who survive their first 6 months develop a real passion for extreme pressure environments. A passion for nearly being crushed to death." Kaylin asked, aghast. "Well, it's exciting work," Quinn said, a dreamy look in her eyes. "Every shift is a challenge. And the crystal formations we're extracting are genuinely beautiful. There is something profound about bringing light to structures that formed in absolute darkness under impossible pressure." She was a poet and a maniac. And Kaylin was beginning to suspect those two things were synonymous when it came to humans. On Ignis V, he encountered a facility operating in temperatures that should have vaporized organic matter. The planet orbited close to a dying star, its surface a landscape of liquid metal and atmospheric plasma. Humans had built their mining station underground, drilling through the crust to access rare thermoreactive compounds. The heat was so intense that the facility's cooling systems ran constantly, battling entropy with brute force engineering. Workers moved through corridors where the walls were warm to the touch despite 6 feet of insulation. Emergency cooling stations were positioned every 30 meters, and people treated overheating like other species treated catching a cold. "We keep the internal temperature at about 105 degrees Fahrenheit, explained Rice Talvin, the facility supervisor, a man whose skin was perpetually flushed a deep red. "Could be cooler, but the power requirements would cut into profit margins. Everyone adjusts eventually. We go through a lot of water, though. Hydration is key. 105 degrees. That's above optimal biological function for most species." "Yeah, it's pretty toasty, but you get used to it," Rice said with a shrug. Honestly, when people go on leave and visit normal temperature stations, they complain about being cold. On Glacius Fall, Kaylin found the opposite problem. A frozen world where temperatures never rose above -200 degrees Celsius. The atmosphere was frozen solid. The rock was so cold it became brittle. Mining operations required equipment that could function in temperatures that made liquid nitrogen look warm. And somehow, impossibly, humans were working there. "The cold is actually less dangerous than you'd think," said Marquez, the chief engineer, a woman bundled in a thermal suit that made her look like a walking insulation cocoon. "The real problem is equipment failure. Metal gets brittle at these temperatures. Structural fatigue happens fast. We're constantly replacing parts that crack or shatter. And the workers. Oh, they're fine as long as they stay in their suits. We have heated rest areas where they can warm up between shifts. Some people actually prefer working here. No hostile atmosphere to worry about. No corrosive chemicals. Just cold, simple, honest cold. I saw 3 memorials on my way here for workers who died on this facility," Kaylin noted. "Right. Suit failures, mostly," Mara said matter-of-factly. "When your heating system cuts out at -200, you've got about 4 minutes before critical biological shutdown. That's enough time to reach an emergency shelter if you're close enough. And if the shelter door isn't frozen shut. 3 people weren't fast enough." Mara said it with the same tone someone might use to discuss traffic delays. On Faraday's cage, a planet with electromagnetic storms so powerful they could fry conventional electronics in seconds, humans had built a facility entirely underground using non-electronic systems. Mechanical computers, pneumatic controls, mining equipment operated through physical linkages and hydraulic pressure. We're basically running a mining operation with 19th century technology, explained the facility coordinator, a man named Breck Holloway, who had the weathered look of someone who made peace with insanity. But it works. And since we're not relying on electronics, the storms don't affect our operations. We're actually more efficient than facilities on easier planets because we don't lose productivity to equipment failures. But surely the lack of automation reduces efficiency. Kalen suggested. You'd think, Breck agreed. But our workers are really good at their jobs. When you can't rely on computers to do the thinking for you, you develop excellent problem-solving skills. Plus, there is something satisfying about operating purely mechanical systems. Very hands-on, very direct cause and effect. By the time Kalen reached his 6th facility, he was beginning to notice patterns. Human mining operations didn't succeed because they had superior technology. They succeeded because humans approached impossible problems with a combination of engineering creativity and a complete disregard for conventional wisdom. They didn't build safer systems, they built tougher systems. They didn't avoid danger, they calculated danger and decided if the math worked. They didn't aim for 0 fatalities, they aimed for acceptable fatalities while providing excellent compensation packages. It was horrifying. It was brilliant. It violated every principle of civilized workplace safety. And it was making them astronomically wealthy. He spent his evenings reviewing financial reports that made him question his understanding of economics. Human mining corporations were pulling resources from crimson-marked worlds at a fraction of the cost conventional wisdom said was possible. They were flooding the galactic market with materials that had been rare and expensive for millennia. Compressed core metals from high-gravity worlds, thermoreactive compounds from superheated planets, pressure-crystallized carbon structures from deep-crush environments, exotic isotopes from radiation-saturated systems. Things that should have cost a fortune to extract were suddenly cheap. The Cygnus or Syndicate had filed 6 separate complaints with the galactic trade authorities, claiming humans were using illegal technology or receiving subsidies that violated fair trade agreements. Investigations had proven both claims false. Humans were just better at operating in environments that wanted them dead. On his 10th facility visit, to a planet called Pharaoh's Dust that featured an atmosphere of aerosolized metal particles, Kalen finally asked the question that had been haunting him. Why? The facility supervisor, a woman named Ellery Crane, who'd been working Crimson sites for 12 years, looked at him with mild confusion. Why? What? Why do you do this? Kalen pressed. You could work safer jobs, easier jobs, jobs that don't have a statistical probability of killing you. Why come to these nightmare worlds and risk your lives? For what? Money. Pride. Some kind of elaborate death wish. Ellery considered the question, standing in the observation room of a facility that had to be cleaned twice daily because metal particles accumulated on every surface like toxic dust. I guess because it's interesting, she said finally. Most jobs are boring. You show up, do your tasks, go home, repeat forever. It's safe, sure, but it's also dull. Here, every day is different. Every shift brings new challenges. You're constantly solving problems that nobody else ever encountered before. But people die. Yeah, but people die everywhere, Ellery said, her voice soft but firm. At least here, when someone dies, it's because they were doing something remarkable. They were pushing the boundaries of what is possible. They were part of something bigger than themselves. There is meaning in that. Purpose. That's insane. Maybe, Ellery conceded with a small smile. But it's also true. Look. I could work on a nice, safe mining station, extracting common metals from a boring planet with normal gravity and a breathable atmosphere. I could live a long, safe, completely forgettable life. Or I can work here, pulling out materials that shouldn't be extractable, making more money than I ever dreamed of, and knowing that I'm part of something that is changing the galactic economy. Which would you choose? Kalen Jorek had no answer. His species had spent millennia optimizing for safety and longevity. The idea of choosing danger for excitement was alien to him. But humans clearly operated on different principles. They craved challenge. They valued accomplishment over security. They were willing to risk death for the chance to do something nobody else could do. It was insane. It was working. After 6 weeks of facility inspections, Kalen Jorek returned to the Galactic Safety Commission headquarters with a data tablet filled with reports, incident analyses, and documentation that would probably give Grax a stroke. So, his supervisor asked, his rocky form seeming to vibrate with apprehension. Are they violating safety regulations? No, Kalen said, sinking into his chair. No, they're not violating anything. Technically, they found every loophole in our safety codes and exploited them with impressive efficiency. Our regulations were never designed for the kind of environments they're working in. But the fatality rates. Unregulated, Kalen finished for him. There's no galactic standard because no species except humans would accept fatalities as routine operational costs. They VE created an entirely new category of risk management. Grax rubbed his temples, a gesture of deep, tired thought that conveyed centuries of bureaucratic exhaustion. So we can't shut them down. Not legally. They're following the letter of the law. The fact that they're following it while working in conditions that should be impossible is... well, that's a different issue. What do you recommend? Kalen thought about the dozens of humans he'd met. The facility coordinators with their casual attitudes toward catastrophe. The workers who signed up for jobs that might kill them for better pay and interesting work. The engineers who treated physics as a suggestion rather than a law. I recommend we create a new regulatory framework specifically for crimson-marked operations, he said slowly. Call it the Human Exception Clause. Basically, we acknowledge that humans operate on different risk calculation models and create standards that reflect their unique approach to workplace safety. That's insane, Grax rumbled. Yes, but so are they, Kalen countered. And they're not stopping. We VE got reports of humans filing permits for 20 more Crimson sites. If we don't adapt our regulations, they're just going to keep finding loopholes. This is going to cause chaos in the galactic safety community, Grax warned. We VE spent thousands of years establishing universal standards. Creating species-specific exceptions undermines the entire system. I know, Kalen said. But what's the alternative? We maintain our current standards, and humans continue legally operating facilities that horrify every other species. At least with specific regulations, we can impose some oversight. Maybe even reduce their fatality rates from horrifying to merely concerning. Grax sighed. It was a deep, tired sound. Fine. Draft the new regulations. I'll present them to the council. This is going to be a nightmare to implement. Kalen spent the next 3 months writing the most disturbing regulatory document in galactic history. The Human Exception Clause acknowledged that humans operated in crimson-marked environments through methods that violated conventional safety philosophy but technically complied with existing regulations. It established new standards specifically designed for impossible working conditions. Maximum acceptable fatality rates for different hazard classes. Mandatory compensation requirements for families of deceased workers. Equipment inspection schedules for environments that destroyed equipment regularly. Emergency evacuation protocols for situations where evacuation was theoretically impossible. It was a safety regulation that accepted inevitable death as an operational parameter. The galactic safety community lost its collective mind. This is legitimizing workplace mortality. One delegate shrieked during a heated council session. We're accepting that workers will die. This completely undermines millennia of safety culture. But the regulations passed, because the alternative was watching humans continue their operations with no additional oversight. And at least the new framework provided some control. The regulations went into effect 6 months after Kalen's initial inspection. Humans responded by filing permits for 38 additional Crimson mining operations. They're treating the new regulations as permission to expand, Grax said, staring at his tablet in disbelief. We created oversight, and they interpreted it as approval. Of course they did, Kalen replied. He spent enough time around humans to understand their psychology. We told them the rules for operating in impossible conditions. They saw that as confirmation that operating in impossible conditions was allowed. So now they're scaling up. The economic impact hit the galaxy within a year. The Cygnus or Syndicate, which had dominated rare materials extraction for 8,000 years, saw its profits drop by 62%. Four other major mining corporations declared bankruptcy. The market value of compressed core metals dropped by half. Thermal-reactive compounds became common enough that researchers could actually afford to experiment with them. Pressure-crystallized carbon structures that had been precious commodities were suddenly available in bulk quantities. Exotic isotopes that scientists had dreamed of studying were purchasable in standardized quantities. Human mining operations were causing a resource revolution. And they were just getting started. Kalen received reports of new human facilities on planets that didn't even have names yet, just designation codes. Crimson world so hostile that the surveying probes hadn't survived long enough to complete mapping. Humans read the probe failure reports and saw opportunity. On planet CX 1847, where tidal forces from 3 competing gravitational sources created surface conditions that shifted every 6 hours, humans built a mobile mining facility. The entire operation was mounted on massive tracked vehicles that moved constantly, staying ahead of the crushing gravitational waves. "We're essentially surfing gravitational stress zones," explained the facility director, somehow making that sound reasonable. "The resource deposits concentrate along the stress boundaries, so we chase them. It's very dynamic. Keeps everyone alert." On planet CX 2093, where the atmosphere was literally on fire, a permanent plasma storm that had been burning for millions of years, humans built underground, miles underground. They tunneled through rock using thermal-resistant equipment, emerging only to position collection systems that harvested exotic compounds from the burning atmosphere itself. "The heat is intense but manageable," said the chief engineer, a man who looked like he'd been personally fighting thermodynamics for years. "We use the planet's own thermal energy to power our operations. Very efficient. Carbon neutral, technically, if you ignore the occasional facility fires." On planet CX 3156, where the surface was covered in a sea of liquid metal kept molten by residual radioactive decay, humans built floating platforms. Massive pontoons of heat-resistant alloys supporting mining facilities that bobbed on waves of molten nickel iron. "It's like operating an oil rig, but the oil is metal and it's 800 degrees and radioactive," explained the facility coordinator cheerfully. "We drain materials from the bottom of the metal sea using heat-resistant pumps. The real trick is managing the platform stability during magnetic storms. The liquid metal responds to the planet's electromagnetic field, so we get these waves that can flip us if we're not careful. Lost 2 platforms that way before we figured out the proper ballast ratios." Each new facility pushed the boundaries of what Kalen thought was possible. Each one found new and creative ways to survive in environments that seemed specifically designed to kill everything. And each one was profitable. 2 years after his initial inspection, Kalen Jorek was summoned to a meeting of the Galactic Economic Council. The council, composed of representatives from 83 different civilizations, was responsible for managing interstellar trade and maintaining economic stability. They were not happy. "The human mining operations are destabilizing the entire rare materials market," declared Councillor Vex Thorin, a being whose species had built their economy around exotic mineral extraction. "Prices are collapsing. Entire industries are being disrupted. We need action. Tariffs, trade restrictions, operating limitations, something to slow down the human expansion before they destroy the economic models that have sustained galactic commerce for millennia." The debate raged for 3 hours. Proposals were made and dismissed. Economic models were presented and torn apart. Everyone could see the problem. Nobody had a solution. Finally, the moderator called on Kalen Jorek. "Inspector, you've spent more time observing human mining operations than anyone. What's your assessment?" Is there any way to limit their impact on the galactic economy? Kalen stood, every eye in the chamber turned toward him. No, he said simply. No. That's your entire assessment. You asked if there's any way to limit their impact. Their ISNT, humans have identified a market opportunity that every other species ignored because it seemed impossible, Kalen explained, his voice clear and steady. They developed operational methods that work in environments we classified as unserviceable. They're not violating any laws. They're not using illegal technology. They're just willing to accept risks that no other species will accept. The economic disruption. That's the market correcting itself. For millennia, rare materials have been expensive because they were difficult to extract. Humans have made them less difficult to extract. That changes prices. That changes industries. That's how economics works. You can't legislate against efficiency. So we do nothing, Vex Thorne scoffed. We just watch as human mining corporations destroy entire economic sectors. I'm not saying do nothing, Kalen countered. I'm saying you can't stop them. What you can do is adapt. Invest in industries that aren't based on resource scarcity. Develop technologies that use these newly abundant materials. Find new economic opportunities instead of trying to protect old ones. The chamber erupted in angry discussion. Kalen sat down. He said what needed saying. Whether anyone listened wasn't his responsibility. The meeting ended with no decisions made. The council agreed to reconvene after studying the issue further. In political terms, that meant they were going to do nothing and hope the problem solved itself. It didn't. Over the next 5 years, human mining operations expanded to 68 Crimson worlds. Their operational methods improved. Fatality rates dropped from 6% per quarter to 3%. Still horrifying by galactic standards, still acceptable by human standards. Resource prices continued to fall. Industries adapted or died. New technologies emerged that took advantage of suddenly abundant materials. The galaxy's economy shifted in ways nobody had predicted. And through it all, humans kept digging holes in places that wanted them dead. Kalen received periodic reports. The Galactic Safety Commission now had an entire division dedicated to human operations. Inspectors who specialized in impossible environments. Regulatory frameworks designed around accepting calculated risk. Safety standards that included acceptable death as a parameter. It was everything Kalen had spent his career fighting against, and it was working. On his 400th birthday, Kalen Jorek decided to retire. 294 years as a safety inspector was enough. He'd seen the galaxy change in ways he never imagined. He'd watched humans transform resource extraction from a cautious, carefully managed industry into something that resembled organized insanity. His last official act was approving permit applications for 12 new human mining facilities, all Crimson worlds, all operating on the edge of impossibility. He signed the permits without hesitation. Because that was the galaxy now. A place where humans mined planets that should kill them. Where safety regulations included provisions for routine fatalities. Where impossible was just a starting point for planning. 10 years after his retirement, Kalen Jorek received a message from Eva Rostova. She was still working at Mining Station Triumph on Xylos B, still cheerful, still alive against all probability. Hey, Inspector. Hope retirement is treating you well. Just wanted to let you know that Triumph just hit a major milestone. We've been operating for 15 years with 0 days where someone didn't say, this is probably going to kill me, but let us try it anyway. Thought you'd appreciate the irony. Also, we're expanding operations to the southern continent, which has worse atmospheric conditions and more frequent quakes, but amazing mineral deposits. Corporate approved the proposal. It's going to be great. Hope you're enjoying not being terrified all the time. Miss having you around. Stay safe. Or as safe as life allows, anyway. Kalen read the message 3 times. Then he looked out the window of his retirement habitat at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, humans were drilling holes in nightmares. They were surviving where survival should be impossible. They were turning death worlds into profit centers through sheer stubbornness and calculated risk. The galaxy had classified 89 systems as uninhabitable. Humans had started mining operations in 68 of them. The remaining 21 were probably next. And there was absolutely nothing anyone could do about it except adapt to the new reality. A reality where impossible just meant humans hadn't figured out the proper equipment ratios yet. Where death was an acceptable operational risk if the compensation packages were good enough. Where the only thing separating a crimson nightmare from a productive mining site was human willingness to work there. The Galactic Safety Commission had updated their classification system. There were now 3 categories for planetary hazards: safe, hazardous, and uninhabitable, except for humans, who will mine it anyway. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't what Kalen would have chosen. But it was accurate. And in the end, accuracy mattered more than comfort. He composed a reply to Eva's message. Congratulations on your milestone. Try not to die. That's not a regulation, just friendly advice. Her response came back within minutes. No promises. But we'll do our best. Well, we'll do our acceptable best, which is different from actual best, but still pretty good. Kalen closed his communication system and poured himself a drink, something strong, something appropriate for contemplating the fundamental absurdity of a universe where humans existed. The galaxy would never be completely safe again, but it would be more interesting. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't entirely terrible.